I attended my husband's secret wedding. He froze when he saw me in the front row. The invitation that shouldn't have existed. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning. No return address. No handwritten note. Just a thick ivory envelope resting quietly in my mailbox. At first, I assumed it had been delivered to the wrong house. I carried it inside, placed it on the kitchen counter, and continued making coffee. It wasn't until I noticed my name printed in elegant gold letters that I stopped. Mrs. Emily Carter. My heart skipped a beat. No one had called me Mrs. Carter in years except banks, insurance companies, and formal invitations. Curious, I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a beautifully designed wedding invitation. You are cordially invited to celebrate the marriage of... I smiled. Someone must have made a mistake. Then I read the groom's name. The coffee mug slipped from my hand and shattered across the kitchen floor. Daniel Carter. My husband. For a moment I couldn't breathe. I blinked several times, convinced my eyes were playing tricks on me. I read it again, and again. The words never changed. Groom, Daniel Carter. There was no middle name, no spelling mistake, no explanation. Just my husband's full name printed in elegant black ink. I stood frozen in the middle of the kitchen. There had to be another Daniel Carter. There had to be. Daniel and I had been married for 6 years. We weren't perfect. We argued over little things. He worked long hours. I often complained that he spent too much time on business trips. But divorce? A secret wedding? Impossible. At least, that's what I wanted to believe. When Daniel came home that evening, I almost showed him the invitation. Almost. Instead, I watched him. He kissed my forehead, asked how my day had been, complained about traffic. Everything looked normal. Too normal. Then his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and smiled. A smile I hadn't seen in months. Everything okay? I asked. He quickly locked the phone. Just work. Work. That word had become the answer to everything lately. Why he came home late. Why he missed anniversaries. Why he canceled weekend plans. Why he spent hours texting after midnight. I wanted to believe him, but the invitation sitting in my desk drawer wouldn't let me. That night, after Daniel fell asleep, I quietly walked into my home office. I placed the invitation under my desk lamp. The wedding was scheduled for 3 weeks later. The venue was one of the most luxurious hotels in the city. The guest list was marked private ceremony. At the bottom of the invitation was a single sentence that made my stomach twist. We look forward to celebrating this beautiful new beginning. New beginning. What did that mean? A mistake? A cruel joke? Or something far worse? The next morning, I called my best friend Rachel. She answered on the second ring. You sound upset, she said immediately. I need to show you something. An hour later, she sat across from me at my dining table, staring at the invitation. This has to be fake, she whispered. I thought so too. Have you asked Daniel? I slowly shook my head. No. Why not? Because if it's real. I only get one chance to find out the truth. Rachel reached across the table and squeezed my hand. What are you going to do? I looked back at the invitation. I'm going to attend the wedding. Her eyes widened. Emily, if someone is planning to marry my husband, I deserve to know why. Over the following days, I became someone I barely recognized. I stopped asking Daniel where he was going. I stopped questioning his late-night meetings. Instead, I listened. I observed. And little by little, the pieces began to fit together. He started buying expensive suits. He received mysterious deliveries he refused to open in front of me. He spent hours talking quietly on the balcony. One evening, I heard him say something that sent chills through my entire body. Everything will be over soon. I promise. He didn't know I was standing just inside the doorway. A week before the wedding, another envelope arrived. Inside was a guest pass with my name. Front row, reserved seat. I stared at it in disbelief. Front row? Who had sent this? And more importantly, who wanted me to witness the ceremony? This wasn't an accident anymore. Someone knew exactly who I was. Someone wanted me there. But why? The night before the wedding, Daniel packed a small suitcase. Another business conference? I asked. He smiled without looking at me. Just one night. I'll be back tomorrow evening. Tomorrow. The same day as the wedding. He kissed my cheek before leaving. I love you. The front door closed behind him. I stood in complete silence. For the first time in 6 years, I didn't say the words back. The next morning, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror wearing a simple navy blue dress. No dramatic makeup, no tears, no anger, just quiet determination. I slipped the invitation into my purse and drove toward the Grand Wellington Hotel. As I pulled into the parking lot, I noticed rows of luxury cars, photographers, and elegant floral arrangements covering the entrance. This wasn't a small ceremony. Someone had spent a fortune. A hotel attendant smiled as he checked my invitation. "Welcome, Mrs. Carter. Your seat is waiting." He escorted me through the grand ballroom. Hundreds of guests were already seated. Soft music filled the air. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead. Then he stopped. "Here you are. Front row, directly facing the altar." I sat down slowly, my heart pounding louder with every passing second. The music suddenly changed. The guests stood. The doors at the back of the ballroom slowly opened. The groom stepped inside. He looked confident, until his eyes met mine. The color drained from Daniel's face. His smile vanished instantly. For one terrifying moment, the entire wedding stopped. The groom who turned white. The ballroom fell into complete silence. Daniel stood frozen at the entrance. His eyes were locked on mine. For a brief second, it felt as though the hundreds of guests around us had disappeared. There were no flowers, no music, no wedding, just my husband and the wife he never expected to see. The smile on his face vanished. His hands tightened around the bouquet he was holding. I could actually see him struggling to breathe. The wedding planner leaned toward him. "Sir, is everything all right?" Daniel forced a weak smile. "Why, yes. I'm fine." But he wasn't. Not even close. I remained perfectly still. No tears. No shouting. No dramatic scene. I simply looked at him. Sometimes silence is far more terrifying than anger. The guests began whispering. "Who is that woman? Why is the groom staring at her? Do they know each other?" Daniel finally looked away and slowly walked toward the altar. Every step seemed heavier than the last. I noticed sweat forming on his forehead despite the air-conditioned ballroom. Whatever secret he had been hiding, it was beginning to crack. The officiant smiled warmly. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are gathered here today to celebrate the love between Daniel Carter and Sophia Reynolds." Sophia, so that was her name. A beautiful blonde woman walked gracefully down the aisle. She looked genuinely happy. She smiled at Daniel with complete trust. Looking at her, I realized something. She had no idea I existed. She wasn't my enemy. She was another victim. As Sophia reached the altar, she noticed Daniel wasn't looking at her. His attention kept drifting back toward the front row. "Toward me," she whispered. "Daniel!" He jumped. "What? Are you okay?" He forced another smile. "Just nervous." She laughed softly. "Me too." If only she knew the real reason. The ceremony began. The officiant spoke about honesty, trust, commitment, forever. Every word felt painfully ironic. Daniel couldn't stand still. His hands shook. He kept swallowing nervously. 3 different times he glanced toward me. Every time, I met his eyes without saying a single word. The guilt on his face grew stronger. Halfway through the ceremony, my phone vibrated. It was Rachel. "Rachel, are you there?" I replied with one sentence. "Emily, it's him." 3 dots appeared immediately. Then another message. "Rachel, oh my God." I put my phone away. There would be time to explain later. Right now. I wanted answers. Then something unexpected happened. The wedding planner quietly approached me. "Mrs. Carter?" "Yes." She handed me a small white envelope. "This was left for you." "By who?" "I'm sorry. I was only told to give it to the lady sitting in the seat." My heart began racing again. I slowly opened the envelope. Inside was a folded note. Only 6 words were written. "Don't leave before the vows." No signature. No explanation. I looked around the ballroom. Someone here knew everything. Someone wanted me to stay. But who? The ceremony continued. Then the officiant asked the traditional question. If anyone knows of any lawful reason these 2 should not be joined in marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace. The entire room became silent. Daniel stared directly at me. His face had turned completely pale. He knew I could end everything with a single sentence. I slowly stood. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. Sophia looked confused. The officiant waited patiently. Daniel's lips trembled. Emily. It was the first time he had said my name all morning. I looked at him calmly. Then, I sat back down. The room exhaled in relief. The ceremony continued. Daniel looked even more frightened. Because now, he had no idea what I was planning. As the vows began, I carefully studied Sophia. She wasn't wearing the smile of a woman stealing another person's husband. She looked sincere. She looked deeply in love, which meant one thing. Daniel had lied to her, just as completely as he had lied to me. The realization broke my heart. Not for myself, for her. I promise to love you forever, Daniel said. His voice cracked. I promise to be honest. Honest. The word echoed through the ballroom like a cruel joke. Sophia smiled through happy tears. I promised the same. The guests applauded. Only I remained silent. Just before the rings were exchanged, the ballroom doors suddenly opened. A tall man in a gray suit entered, carrying a leather briefcase. He wasn't dressed like a wedding guest. He walked with purpose, straight toward the front. The wedding planner rushed over. Sir, this is a private ceremony. He calmly reached into his jacket and showed an identification card. I'm here on official business. Daniel saw him. His eyes widened in horror. No! He whispered. Not now. The stranger looked directly at me. Mrs. Emily Carter? Yes. I believe we need to speak. The entire ballroom turned toward us. Sophia looked completely confused. Daniel looked like he was about to collapse. And whatever was inside that leather briefcase was powerful enough to stop the wedding before the rings were ever exchanged. The truth hidden in the briefcase. Every eye in the ballroom followed the man in the gray suit. The string quartet stopped playing. Even the photographers lowered their cameras. For several long seconds, no one spoke. The silence was almost unbearable. The man adjusted his tie, then looked directly at me. Mrs. Emily Carter? Yes. My name is Michael Lawson. I'm sorry to interrupt the ceremony, but what I have to discuss cannot wait. Daniel's face lost every trace of color. He whispered under his breath. This can't be happening. Sophia looked from Daniel to the stranger, completely confused. Daniel! Who is this? Daniel opened his mouth, but no words came out. The confident man who had walked into the ballroom 20 minutes earlier had disappeared. Now, he looked like someone whose entire world was collapsing. Michael calmly placed his leather briefcase on one of the front row chairs. I represent Lawson and Pierce Corporate Legal Services. He removed a thick folder. I've been trying to contact Mr. Daniel Carter for the past 2 weeks. Daniel swallowed hard. I've been busy. Michael nodded politely. I noticed, which is why I came here personally. Guests began whispering. A legal representative. At a wedding. Something was very wrong. Sophia stepped closer to Daniel. What's he talking about? Daniel forced a nervous smile. It's just a business misunderstanding. Michael looked at him. No, it isn't. He opened the folder and removed several documents. Mr. Carter, you signed multiple business agreements using financial information that is currently under investigation. The ballroom became silent again. Daniel stared at the papers. I can explain. I'm sure you can. Michael replied calmly. But not here. The officiant cleared his throat awkwardly. Perhaps we should continue the ceremony. No. A soft voice interrupted. Everyone turned toward me. For the first time since entering the ballroom, I spoke. I think everyone deserves the truth first. Daniel closed his eyes. He knew exactly what was coming. Sophia looked directly at me. I'm sorry, but who are you? The question echoed through the ballroom. Hundreds of guests waited for my answer. I stood slowly. My hands remained steady. My name is Emily Carter. I paused. I am Daniel Carter's wife. The room exploded with gasps. Someone dropped a champagne glass. Several guests stood from their seats. Sophia stared at Daniel in complete disbelief. Wife! She laughed nervously. No, that's impossible. She turned toward Daniel. Tell her she's lying. Daniel couldn't, because he wasn't looking at Sophia. He was looking at the floor. Sophia grabbed his arm. Daniel! Say something. Finally, he whispered. It's true. The words shattered the room. Sophia stepped backward as if someone had pushed her. You told me your divorce was finalized. Daniel remained silent. You said she'd already moved overseas. Silence. You told me you hadn't seen her in over a year. Still. Silence. Tears filled Sophia's eyes. You lied to me. I felt no satisfaction watching her cry. Only sadness. She had believed every word. Just as I once had. She looked at me with trembling hands. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I nodded gently. I believe you. She burst into tears. If I'd known he was still married, I never would have agreed to this. For the first time that day, I saw Daniel completely alone. No excuses. No lies. No one left to protect him. Michael quietly stepped forward again. Unfortunately, there is another issue. Daniel looked up. What now? Michael placed another document on the table beside the altar. This concerns Carter Development Group. Daniel froze. His construction company. What about it? Michael looked toward me. Mrs. Carter, I believe this document belongs to you. I frowned. What is it? A corporate acquisition agreement. I stared at the front page. The name printed across the top made my heart skip. Horizon Holdings International. My father's company. One of the largest investment groups in the country. My hands began to shake. I looked at Michael. What is this? He smiled slightly. The acquisition became official this morning. I looked down again. Then I saw the next line. Acquisition of Carter Development Group, effective immediately. I blinked. No. This couldn't be real. Daniel rushed forward. What acquisition? Michael calmly handed him another copy. Your company has been purchased. Daniel laughed nervously. By who? Michael turned toward me. Mrs. Carter. Congratulations. As of 9 a.m. today, your family company officially became the new owner. The ballroom fell into complete silence. Daniel stared at me. His mouth slowly opened. You own the company? I looked just as shocked. I didn't even know this was happening. Michael nodded. Your father wanted it to be a surprise. He finalized the purchase before informing you. Daniel's knees nearly gave out. The company he had spent years building. The company he had proudly chosen over his marriage now belonged to the family of the wife he had betrayed. He whispered, "Oh my God!" But Michael wasn't finished. He reached into the briefcase one last time. There is one final document, and after you read it, this wedding will be the least of your concerns. The secret he never knew. The ballroom was so quiet that I could hear the soft hum of the air conditioner. Daniel stood motionless, still holding the folder Michael had handed him. His fingers trembled as he turned the first page. His company logo, the official acquisition documents, the signatures, the corporate seal. Everything was real. He looked up at me, completely stunned. You knew about this? I slowly shook my head. No. I found out at the same time you did. He searched my face, hoping to find some sign that I was lying. There wasn't one. Michael opened his briefcase one last time. This document isn't part of the acquisition. It's a personal letter. A letter? Yes. From your father. He handed the envelope to me. I recognized the handwriting immediately. My father rarely wrote letters. When he did, they were always important. I carefully opened it. Inside was a single page. My dearest Emily, if you're reading this, it means today's acquisition has already been completed. I know you never wanted special treatment because of our family name. That's why I respected your decision to build your own life without using our influence. But a few months ago, I learned things about Daniel that deeply concerned me. I hired investigators, not to interfere in your marriage, but to protect you. What they discovered forced me to act. I bought his company because I refused to let the man who betrayed my daughter continue using our family's business relationships to build his success. The decision about what happens next is entirely yours. Whatever you choose, remember this. You never needed anyone's permission to know your worth. I have always been proud of you. Love, Dad. By the time I finished reading, tears filled my eyes. Not because of the acquisition. Because for the first time in years, I felt completely seen. Daniel lowered his head. So your father knew. He knew enough. Sophia looked between us, trying to understand everything. Wait! She frowned. Your father owns Horizon Holdings. I nodded quietly. Sophia took a step back. You mean, Emily, you're the daughter of Richard Bennett? The room erupted into whispers. Richard Bennett was one of the most respected business leaders in the country. His name appeared regularly in financial magazines. He had built a business empire over 3 decades. Very few people knew I was his daughter. That had always been intentional. I never wanted people to treat me differently because of my last name, I said. So I built my own career. I wanted to earn respect, not inherit it. Daniel looked like he had been punched in the stomach. I know what you thought. I thought you were just a receptionist, an assistant, a woman who needed saving. He couldn't answer, because every assumption he had ever made was now exposed. Sophia wiped away her tears. Daniel, did you know who she really was? No. You never asked, she whispered. He looked at me. I guess I didn't. That sentence hurt more than anything else. Not because he hadn't known. Because he had never cared enough to find out. Michael cleared his throat. There is still one important matter. Everyone turned toward him. Mr. Carter, your employment contract includes a change of ownership clause. Daniel looked confused. What does that mean? It means the new owner has the right to review every executive position. He swallowed hard. My position will be reviewed. The room fell silent again. One of Daniel's business partners, who had been sitting near the back, suddenly stood up. Daniel, is everything he said true? Daniel didn't respond. Another executive shook his head. We had no idea you were still legally married. A third quietly picked up his coat. I think it's time for us to leave. Within minutes, several investors and business associates walked out of the ballroom. Not because of the failed wedding. Because trust had been broken. And in business, trust is everything. Sophia slowly removed her engagement ring. She looked at it for several seconds. Then she placed it gently into Daniel's hand. I love the man I thought you were. She fought back tears. But I don't know the man standing in front of me. Daniel reached toward her. Sophia, please. She stepped back. No. You lied to me from the beginning. I won't build a marriage on someone else's broken one. Without another word, she turned and walked down the aisle alone. The guests quietly moved aside to let her pass. No applause. No music. Just silence. Daniel watched her disappear through the ballroom doors. Then he turned toward me. I've lost everything. I looked at him calmly. No. You lost everything the day you chose dishonesty. Today, you simply discover the cost. He had no answer. Because deep down, he knew I was right. Michael checked his watch. Mrs. Bennett. I smiled faintly. I haven't used that name in years. He nodded. Your father asked me to remind you of tonight's board meeting. Board meeting? Yes. The acquisition is complete. And as the majority shareholders, designated representative, everyone is expecting you. Daniel looked up in disbelief. You're going to run the company? I looked at him quietly. I haven't decided yet, but I do know one thing. I won't build it the way you did. I turned toward the ballroom exit. The photographers outside had no idea what had just happened inside. To them, it looked like a wedding that had ended early. They couldn't possibly know. The real story wasn't about a wedding at all. It was about a woman who had been underestimated for years. And the moment the truth finally set her free. As I reached the doors, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my father. The board meeting starts in 1 hour. There's one more surprise waiting for you. I stared at the screen. One more surprise? After everything that had happened today, I couldn't imagine what else was left to discover. But I was about to find out. The boardroom surprise. The Grand Wellington Hotel was still buzzing with confused guests when I stepped outside. Photographers crowded the entrance, hoping to capture pictures of the bride and groom. Instead, they watched the bride leave alone with tears in her eyes. Daniel never came out. He remained inside the ballroom, surrounded by lawyers, business partners, and the consequences of his own decisions. For a moment, I looked back at the building. 6 years of marriage had ended in a single afternoon. Oddly enough, I didn't feel angry. I felt relieved. Michael opened the rear door of a black luxury sedan. Your father asked me to bring you directly to Horizon Holdings. I got inside without asking another question. The city lights blurred past the windows as we drove downtown. Neither of us spoke for several minutes. Finally, I broke the silence. My father planned all of this. Michael smiled politely. Not the wedding. But once he learned what Daniel was doing, he decided to protect you. He also wanted you to discover the truth with your own eyes. I nodded. That sounded exactly like my father. He never made decisions out of revenge. Only responsibility. 20 minutes later, we arrived at Horizon Holdings headquarters. The glass tower stretched high into the night sky. I had visited the building many times growing up, but tonight felt different. Tonight, I wasn't arriving as Richard Bennett's daughter. I was arriving as someone who had to make a decision that could change hundreds of people's lives. Michael led me to the executive boardroom. When the doors opened, every conversation stopped. More than 20 executives stood as I entered. At the far end of the room sat my father. He smiled warmly. "Welcome, Emily." For the first time that day, I let my emotions show. I walked over and hugged him. "I wish we were meeting under different circumstances." "So do I," he replied. After everyone took their seats, my father stood. "Ladies and gentlemen, as of today, Horizon Holdings has officially acquired Carter Development Group." A large screen behind him displayed the company's financial reports. The acquisition wasn't made to eliminate jobs or destroy the company. It was made to save a business that was heading in the wrong direction. He looked directly at me, and because I believe someone else should lead its future, I frowned. "Dad," he smiled, "I'd like to nominate Emily Bennett as Interim Chief Executive Officer." The room erupted into applause. I was stunned. "I've never asked for this." "I know, but you've spent 10 years building successful companies from the ground up. You've earned it." One by one, the board members voted. Every hand went up. The decision was unanimous. I was officially appointed interim CEO. For a moment, I simply sat there, unable to speak. My father leaned closer. "Titles don't make leaders. Character does. Don't forget that." "I won't." The celebration lasted only a few minutes before the board secretary entered with another file. "I'm sorry to interrupt. We've received the internal audit." My father looked surprised. "Already?" She nodded. "The preliminary findings aren't good." The room became serious again. The audit revealed something unexpected. Daniel hadn't just lied about his marriage. Several senior managers had approved questionable contracts over the past 2 years. Inflated invoices, fake consulting fees, undisclosed payments. It wasn't a criminal conspiracy, but it showed a culture where no one questioned unethical decisions. I looked around the room. This company doesn't just need a new CEO. It needs a new culture. Every executive nodded. The next morning, I walked into Carter Development Group's headquarters for the first time as its new leader. Employees gathered in the lobby, whispering among themselves. They had all heard rumors. Some expected mass layoffs. Others believed the company would be dissolved. I stepped onto the small stage in the reception area. "My name is Emily Bennett. As of today, I'll be leading this company." The room became silent. I didn't come here to punish honest people. I came here to rebuild trust. Relief spread across many faces. If you've worked with integrity, you have nothing to fear. But if you've built your career through dishonesty, this company is no longer the place for you. The applause started slowly, then it filled the entire building. As I finished speaking, my assistant hurried toward me. "Ms. Bennett, you have an unexpected visitor." "Who is it?" She hesitated. "It's Daniel." I looked through the glass doors. He stood outside in yesterday's wrinkled suit. He looked exhausted, defeated. He held a small cardboard box containing the personal belongings from his office. For the first time in his career, he wasn't arriving as an executive. He was leaving as a former employee. I took a deep breath. "Send him in." A few moments later, he walked into my office. He looked around quietly before speaking. "I never imagined I'd walk into this office, and you'd be sitting behind that desk." I looked at him calmly. "Neither did I." He placed his employee ID card on my desk. "I came to return this." There was a long silence. Then he asked the question I had been expecting. "Are you going to fire me?" I folded my hands and looked him straight in the eyes. "My decision won't be based on our marriage. It will be based on your actions." He lowered his head. "I understand." Just then, there was another knock at the office door. My assistant stepped inside. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Miss Bennett, but the forensic audit team has arrived. They say they've uncovered something involving Mr. Carter, and it can't wait." Daniel slowly looked up. Fear filled his eyes once again, because whatever the auditors had discovered was something even he didn't see coming. The audit that changed everything. Daniel's expression changed the moment he heard the words forensic audit. His shoulders stiffened. His eyes moved from me to the conference room door. I don't understand, he said quietly. I've already turned in my company laptop and my employee badge. The lead forensic auditor, a middle-aged woman named Laura Simmons, stepped into my office carrying 2 thick binders. She placed them carefully on the table. This isn't about your resignation, Mr. Carter. It's about what we discovered while reviewing the company's financial records. The room fell silent. Laura opened the first binder. For the past 18 months, Carter Development Group approved dozens of high-value construction contracts. Daniel nodded. I signed many of them. That's correct. She slid several documents across the table. Most of those contracts were legitimate, but 12 weren't. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? Someone created fake subcontractor companies. Those companies submitted invoices. The invoices were approved, and the payments disappeared. Daniel stared at the documents. I never saw these. Laura looked directly at him. We believe you didn't. I leaned forward. If Daniel didn't create the companies, who did? Laura turned another page. That's exactly what we've been investigating. She pointed to a series of digital approval logs. Every fraudulent payment required 2 executive approvals. The first belonged to the finance department. The second came from an executive access card. Daniel looked confused. My access card? Laura nodded. Yes, but here's the strange part. She placed another report on the table. According to the building's security system, your access card was used while you were attending conferences in another state. Daniel blinked. That's impossible. Exactly. For the first time that day, I saw genuine confusion instead of fear. Daniel slowly looked at me. I swear, I didn't authorize any of this. I believed him, not because he was my husband, because the evidence suggested someone else had been using his authority. Laura continued. After reviewing surveillance footage, we identified one person entering Mr. Carter's office repeatedly after business hours. She pressed a button on her tablet. A security video appeared on the screen. A man unlocked Daniel's office. He copied files from the computer, opened confidential cabinets, and quietly left. Daniel immediately recognized him. That's Eric. Eric Thompson, my chief financial officer. Laura nodded. He resigned yesterday. What? He cleared out his office before sunrise. The room became completely still. Daniel sat back in his chair. He was my friend. We've worked together for 9 years. Laura closed the binder. Sometimes the people closest to us know exactly where our blind spots are. Those words hit both of us harder than anyone realized. Because they described far more than the audit. They described my marriage. Over the next hour, Laura explained everything. Eric had secretly created shell companies under different names. He approved inflated invoices, transferred money through multiple accounts, and used Daniel's executive credentials to avoid suspicion. The fraud totaled nearly $8 million. Fortunately, most of the money had already been frozen by investigators. But the damage to the company's reputation was significant. Daniel buried his face in his hands. I should have seen it. Laura spoke gently. Trust isn't a weakness, but refusing to verify is. I glanced toward Daniel. He wasn't a criminal. He had been careless. The same carelessness that destroyed our marriage had nearly destroyed his company. Later that afternoon, the executive board gathered in the conference room. Everyone expected me to announce layoffs. Instead, I made a different decision. We're creating a completely new compliance department. No executive, including me, will ever approve major payments without independent review. Some board members looked surprised. I continued. Companies don't fail because of one dishonest person. They fail when honest people stop asking questions. The room nodded in agreement. As the meeting ended, my father quietly approached me. You handled that well. I learned from you. He smiled. No, you learned from your own experience. He placed a hand on my shoulder. I'm proud of you. That evening, Daniel knocked on my office door once more. He looked emotionally exhausted. I came to thank you. For what? You could have blamed everything on me. You didn't. I looked at him honestly. I don't believe in punishing people for mistakes they didn't make. He nodded. But I made enough other mistakes. Yes, you did. There was no anger in my voice. Only truth. Daniel reached into his jacket pocket and removed a small velvet box. I found this while packing. He handed it to me. Inside was my wedding ring, the one I'd left behind after moving out. I thought it belonged with you. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I gently closed the box. No, it belongs to the past. He understood. Without another word, he placed the box back into his pocket. As he reached the office door, my phone rang. It was Michael Lawson. His voice sounded unusually serious. Emily, we've located Eric Thompson. I stood up immediately. Where? He wasn't trying to escape. He was trying to meet someone. Who? Michael paused. You need to come to the warehouse immediately, because the person waiting for him is someone you know very well. I felt a chill run down my spine. Daniel looked at me. What happened? I slowly lowered the phone. I think we've only uncovered half the truth. And for the first time since the wedding, I realized the story wasn't just about betrayal in a marriage. It was about a much larger betrayal, one that had been carefully planned for years. The mastermind behind the betrayal. Michael's words echoed in my mind. The person waiting for Eric is someone you know very well. I grabbed my coat. Dad, I'm leaving. My father stood immediately. You're not going alone. Within minutes, Michael, 2 corporate investigators, my father, and I were driving toward an abandoned warehouse on the edge of the city. Daniel insisted on coming. I deserve to know the truth. For a moment, I hesitated. Then I nodded. Fine. But whatever happens, you stay behind us. He agreed without arguing. Rain had begun to fall by the time we arrived. The warehouse looked deserted. Only one black SUV was parked outside. Michael raised his hand. Our investigators are already inside. We quietly entered through a side door. The enormous building was almost completely dark. Then, voices. Someone was arguing. Michael motioned for us to stay quiet. We slowly moved closer. Between stacks of old shipping containers, 2 men stood facing each other. One of them was Eric Thompson. The other made my heart stop. Uncle Robert, my father's younger brother. The man who had attended every family holiday. The man who always called me his favorite niece. My father stared at him in disbelief. Robert, what are you doing here? Robert slowly turned around. For several long seconds, no one spoke. Finally, Robert sighed. I suppose it's over. Eric looked terrified. You told me no one would find us. Robert glared at him. Be quiet. Michael stepped forward. Mr. Robert Bennett, you've been under investigation for almost 4 months. Robert laughed bitterly. So the acquisition wasn't just about Daniel's company. No, it was about following the money. Daniel looked completely confused. What money? Michael opened another folder. The fake subcontractor companies were secretly controlled by Robert Bennett. My father couldn't believe what he was hearing. My own brother? Robert smiled sadly. You always got everything. The company, the respect, the father's approval. I spent my entire life standing in your shadow. My father shook his head. So you stole from innocent people? I took what should have been mine. I stared at my uncle. You used Daniel. Robert looked at me. He made it easy. He never checked the paperwork. He trusted the wrong people. Daniel lowered his head. Robert wasn't wrong. Then Robert said something none of us expected. I never planned for the wedding. Everyone looked at him. I didn't even know Daniel was secretly getting married. He turned toward Daniel with obvious disappointment. That foolish decision destroyed months of careful planning. Daniel looked stunned. You knew I was still married? Of course. I know everything about the people I do business with. The realization hit Daniel like a truck. Even the man manipulating him had known the truth. Police officers quietly entered the warehouse. Michael nodded toward them. It's over. Robert didn't resist. Neither did Eric. As officers placed them in handcuffs, Robert looked back at my father. You'll always be the hero. My father answered calmly. No, I was simply honest. There was a difference. As the police escorted them away, Daniel remained frozen. I trusted Eric like family. I looked at him, and I trusted you. He closed his eyes. He finally understood. Betrayal always hurts most when it comes from someone you never expected. The following week, news of the investigation spread across every major business network. Headlines praised Horizon Holdings for uncovering one of the largest corporate fraud schemes in recent years. Investors who had planned to leave Carter Development Group changed their minds. Clients renewed contracts. Employees finally believed the company had a future again. 3 weeks later, I officially accepted the role of Chief Executive Officer. My first decision surprised everyone. Daniel wasn't rehired as an executive, but I also refused to destroy his career. Instead, I recommended him for a leadership ethics program run by another company. Several board members questioned my decision. Why help him? I answered honestly. People should face the consequences of their choices, but if they're willing to change, they deserve a chance to earn a better future. Months passed. The company became stronger than ever. Transparency replaced secrecy. Trust replaced fear. One afternoon, while walking through the office, I noticed a familiar face sitting quietly in the reception area. It was Sophia. She stood when she saw me. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Not at all. She smiled nervously. I wanted to thank you. For what? For telling me the truth before I made the biggest mistake of my life. I smiled. You deserve the truth. She nodded. So did you. Before leaving, she handed me a small envelope. I found this among Daniel's old papers. I think it belongs to you. After she left, I opened it. Inside was a faded photograph from 6 years earlier. It was taken on the day Daniel and I got married. On the back, in Daniel's handwriting, were the words, "The luckiest day of my life." I stared at the photo for a long time, not because I wanted the past back, but because it reminded me how quickly good intentions can disappear when honesty does. As I slipped the photograph back into the envelope, my assistant hurried into my office. "Miss Bennett, you've just received a registered package." "From whom?" She looked at the sender's name and frowned. "It's from a state prison. The sender is Robert Bennett." I slowly took the envelope. After everything that had happened, why would my uncle write to me now? Whatever was inside, I had a feeling it would change everything one last time. The letter from prison. The envelope sat on my desk for almost an hour. I stared at the return address without touching it. State Correctional Facility. Zenda, Robert Bennett. After everything he had done to my family. After the lies, the fraud, and the betrayal. I wasn't sure I wanted to read a single word he had written. My assistant, Claire, gently knocked on the door. "Everything okay, Miss Bennett?" I looked at the envelope. "I honestly don't know." She nodded sympathetically. "You don't have to read it." Maybe I didn't, but a part of me needed to know why he had written. Finally, I broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter. The handwriting was shaky. Nothing like the confident man I had known all my life. "Emily, by the time you read this, I'll have spent several weeks in prison. Every day, I've had time to think about the choices that brought me here. I blamed your father for my failures. I blamed business. I blamed luck. But I never blamed the only person truly responsible. Myself. I spent years believing success belonged to whoever could take it. I was wrong. Success belongs to those who earn it honestly. I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope one day you'll remember me for the uncle who once loved making you laugh. Before greed changed me into someone I no longer recognize. Robert." I slowly folded the letter. For the first time, I didn't feel anger, only sadness, because greed hadn't just destroyed a company. It had destroyed a family. Later that evening, I drove to my parents' house. My father was sitting on the back porch, watching the sunset. Without saying a word, I handed him the letter. He read it quietly. When he finished, he looked toward the horizon. I've waited years to hear him admit the truth. "Does it change anything?" I asked. He shook his head. "No, but maybe it changes him." Life slowly returned to normal. Months passed. Under our new leadership, Carter Development Group experienced its most successful year in over a decade. Employee satisfaction reached record highs. Clients who had once lost confidence returned. For the first time, people spoke about the company because of its integrity, not its scandals. One Friday afternoon, our human resources director walked into my office. "We've received an interesting job application." I smiled. "What's interesting about it?" She handed me the resume. The name immediately caught my attention. Daniel Carter. I looked up. "He applied here." She nodded. "Not for an executive position. He applied for a project coordinator role." a position almost 10 levels below the one he once held. I asked her to send him in. A few minutes later, Daniel entered my office. He looked different, more confident, but quieter. Gone were the expensive suits and designer watches. Instead, he wore a simple navy jacket and carried a worn leather folder. "Thank you for seeing me." I gestured toward the chair. "What brings you here?" He smiled faintly. "I need a job." I raised an eyebrow. "You could work almost anywhere. I've had offers, but every interview ends the same way. They ask about the wedding. And the scandal. I understand." He nodded. "I deserve that." He placed his resume on my desk. "I know I'm not entitled to another chance. I'm simply asking for an opportunity to earn one." There was complete sincerity in his voice. No excuses, no self-pity, just honesty. For the first time in years, I believed every word he said. I reviewed his application carefully. Then I looked up. "If I hire you, you'll report to people who used to work under you." "I know. You'll have to earn their respect." "I understand. And no one will receive special treatment." "I wouldn't want it." I smiled. That answer told me everything I needed to know. The following Monday, Daniel returned to the company. Not as an executive, not as a manager, but as an ordinary employee. Some people whispered, others judged him. Yet every morning, he arrived early. He worked hard. He accepted criticism without complaint. Week after week, he slowly rebuilt something far more valuable than his career. His character. One afternoon, as I walked through the office, I noticed him helping a young intern organize project files. The intern thanked him. Daniel simply smiled. "No problem." Watching from a distance, I realized something. People really can change. Not overnight, not through words, but through consistent actions. That evening, I received an email from Sophia. She had moved to another city and started her own nonprofit organization helping women rebuild their lives after emotional abuse. She wrote, "Emily, I wanted you to know that meeting you changed my life. If you hadn't shown up that day, I would have married a lie. Thank you for having the courage to tell the truth. I hope you're happy. You deserve to be." I smiled as I closed the email. Sometimes, the greatest victories aren't measured in money. They're measured in lives changed. A year later, Horizon Holdings hosted its annual leadership conference. More than 1,000 employees filled the auditorium. As CEO, I walked onto the stage to deliver the opening speech. The audience applauded. I looked across the room, at employees, at executives, at young graduates beginning their careers. Then I began. There was a time when I believed success meant proving people wrong. I paused. I've learned something different. Success isn't about revenge. It's about becoming the person betrayal could never destroy. The room became completely silent. Before I could continue, my assistant hurried toward the stage. She leaned close and whispered, "Ms. Bennett, you need to see this immediately." She handed me a tablet. On the screen was a breaking news alert. My eyes widened. The headline read, "Anonymous investor offers $2 billion to purchase Horizon Holdings." The audience had no idea why I'd suddenly stopped speaking. But I knew one thing. Another storm was coming. And this one could change everything all over again. The billion-dollar offer. For a few seconds, I simply stared at the tablet. Anonymous investor offers $2 billion to purchase Horizon Holdings. The headline flashed across every major business news website. The audience continued applauding, unaware that my mind was suddenly racing. I took a slow breath, smiled, and finished my speech as if nothing had happened. Only after the conference ended did I head straight to the executive boardroom. Every board member was already waiting. My father sat at the head of a table. "So," he said, "I assume you've seen the offer." I nodded. "Who is the investor?" "No one knows." Michael Lawson placed a file on the table. The proposal came through an international law firm. They're refusing to reveal the buyer's identity. One of the directors frowned. $2 billion is far below the company's value. Another executive agreed. It doesn't make financial sense. Neither did the secrecy. Something about the offer felt personal. For the next week, our legal team investigated every possible lead. The trail passed through shell companies in 3 different countries. Each company led to another. Whoever was behind the offer had gone to extraordinary lengths to stay hidden. Then Michael called me. "Emily, I think we found our investor." Who is it? There was a long pause. I'd rather show you. The next morning, we arrived at a private conference room in a downtown law office. A man was already waiting. He stood as we entered. He looked to be in his early 60s. Gray hair, tailored suit, calm smile. He extended his hand. My name is Victor Hayes. I represent the investor. I shook his hand. And who is the investor? Victor smiled politely. My client wishes to tell you personally. The conference room door opened again. Footsteps echoed across the marble floor. When the man walked in, every person in the room stood, even my father. The newcomer smiled. Good morning. I've heard wonderful things about you, Emily. He introduced himself. My name is Alexander Grant, one of the most respected entrepreneurs in the country, a billionaire known for buying struggling companies and transforming them into global brands. I had read about him for years, but I had never expected to meet him. Alexander sat across from us. I'll get straight to the point. I'm the anonymous investor. I frowned. You want to buy Horizon Holdings? He shook his head. No. I wanted to see how your leadership team would respond to pressure. The room fell silent. It was a test. He smiled. Exactly. He folded his hands. Companies are offered money every day, but character can't be bought. He looked directly at me. Your board refused an offer that would have made many people incredibly wealthy. That tells me your company values its future more than quick profits. I finally understood. This meeting had never been about a sale. Alexander reached into his briefcase and placed another folder on the table. This is my real proposal. I opened it. Inside was a partnership agreement. His investment group wanted to invest $2 billion into Horizon Holdings, not to own it, but to expand it internationally. The room was speechless. My father looked at me and smiled. The decision is yours. I carefully read every page. The agreement protected our employees, preserved our independence, and funded future growth. It wasn't a takeover. It was an opportunity. I closed the folder. We accept. Alexander smiled. I was hoping you'd say that. 6 months later, Horizon Holdings announced its largest expansion in company history. New offices opened across Europe and Asia. Thousands of new jobs were created. The business magazines called it one of the biggest success stories of the decade. But the achievement wasn't mine alone. It belonged to every honest employee who had stayed through the difficult times. One afternoon, while touring our newest headquarters, I saw Daniel speaking with a group of interns. He was no longer the broken man who had walked into my office looking for work. He had earned 3 promotions through hard work and integrity. When he noticed me, he smiled respectfully. Miss Bennett. Daniel. The conversation was professional. Nothing more. And somehow, that was exactly how it should be. Later that evening, I visited my father. He handed me an old photo album. Inside were pictures from my childhood. One photo caught my attention. It showed me sitting at a tiny lemonade stand when I was 8 years old. On the back, my father had written, "She never waits for opportunities. She creates them." I laughed softly. I don't even remember this. You don't have to, he replied. I've remembered enough for both of us. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with another message from Michael. Emily, we've received an invitation. Invitation to what? His reply came immediately. The International Business Leadership Awards. You've been nominated for CEO of the Year. I smiled. Awards had never been my goal, but they reminded me how far life had brought me. From a woman sitting quietly in the front row of a secret wedding, to someone trusted to lead thousands of people. Yet deep inside, I knew the greatest chapter of my story still wasn't over, because the awards ceremony would reunite me with someone I never expected to see again. Someone whose return would bring my journey full circle. The front row of my new life. 3 months later, the International Business Leadership Awards was the biggest corporate event of the year. CEOs, investors, entrepreneurs, and journalists from around the world filled the grand ballroom. As I stepped onto the red carpet, camera flashes lit up the entrance. Years earlier, I had walked into another ballroom, not as a guest of honor, but as a wife whose heart was about to be broken. Today, I walked in with my head held high. Life had come full circle. My father smiled as we entered. Nervous! I laughed softly. Not anymore. He nodded proudly. Good! Because tonight isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's about celebrating the woman you've become. Those words stayed with me. For years, I thought my story was about revenge. Now I understood. It had always been about growth. The ceremony began. Awards were announced one after another. Finally, the presenter smiled toward the audience. And the recipient of this year's CEO of the Year award is... A pause filled the room. Then, Emily Bennett. The audience erupted into applause. I sat completely still. For a second, I couldn't believe I'd heard my name. My father gently squeezed my hand. Go! You've earned this! As I walked to the stage, I noticed someone standing near the back of the ballroom. Daniel. He wasn't seated with the executives. He had attended as part of the company's project management team. When our eyes met, he smiled. Not with regret, not with hope, but with genuine respect. I smiled back. Sometimes the healthiest relationships are the ones that become memories. Standing at the podium, I looked across hundreds of faces. A few years earlier, I would have spoken about betrayal, about heartbreak, about losing everything. Instead, I spoke about something else. When people hear my story, they usually think it's about a failed marriage. I smiled. It isn't. It's about discovering your worth before someone else defines it for you. The room became completely silent. There will always be people who underestimate you. There will always be people who lie to you. There will always be people who walk away. Let them. Because every closed door creates space for the right one to open. Applause filled the ballroom. After the ceremony, dozens of young entrepreneurs approached me. One young woman looked nervous. Can I ask you something? Of course. How did you stay strong after everything you went through? I smiled because I remembered asking myself the same question years ago. I stopped chasing people who couldn't see my value. And I started building a life that reflected it. She nodded, wiping away a tear. Thank you. No, I replied. Thank you for reminding me why I tell this story. Later that evening, I stepped outside onto the balcony overlooking the city. The cool night air felt peaceful. Daniel quietly joined me. I hope it's okay if I congratulate you. It is. Congratulations. Thank you. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, he broke the silence. I spent years blaming everyone else for my failures. I blamed work. I blamed stress. I even blamed you. He looked down. But the truth is, I ruined my own life. I listened quietly. I'm not asking for another chance. I know that chapter ended a long time ago. I just wanted you to know. You deserve better than the man I was. Those words carried no expectations. Only honesty. I smiled gently. I've already forgiven you. He looked surprised. You have. Yes. Not because you earned it, but because I refused to let resentment control my future. A weight seemed to lift from his shoulders. Thank you. He extended his hand. I shook it. No anger. No bitterness. Just closure. Then he walked away. That was the last time I ever saw him. A year later, Horizon Holdings had become one of the fastest-growing companies in the country. Thousands of families depended on the business we had rebuilt. Integrity had become our greatest strength. One afternoon, my father announced his retirement. During the board meeting, he stood and smiled. I've spent 40 years building this company. Now it's time for the next generation. He turned toward me. I officially nominate Emily Bennett as chairwoman of Horizon Holdings. The vote was unanimous. As everyone applauded, I remember the woman I used to be. The wife who sat silently in the front row of a secret wedding. She thought her life was ending. She had no idea. It was only beginning. That evening, I returned home. I opened a small wooden box in my bedroom. Inside was the invitation that had changed everything. The one that had arrived without a return address. I smiled, not because it reminded me of pain, but because it reminded me of courage. I had chosen to face the truth instead of hiding from it. And that decision had changed the course of my life. I folded the invitation one last time and placed it back in the box. Then I quietly whispered, "Thank you." Not to Daniel, not to fate, but to the version of myself who had been brave enough to walk into that ballroom alone. Because she gave me the life I have today. And if there's one lesson my journey has taught me, it's this. The greatest revenge is not making someone regret losing you. The greatest revenge is becoming the person you were always meant to be. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If this story reminded you to believe in yourself, never settle for less than you deserve, and always choose honesty over comfort, then its purpose has been fulfilled. The end.